All right, welcome into the Tom McManus Webcast here at SuckItUpUSA.com. I'm live at St. Vincent's Hospital over in Riverside, home of Jacksonville's Orthopedic Institute, and here with my good friend Dr. Stan Longenecker. Finally, the tables have turned. I've come into your place of business.
Well,
great to be here.
Thank you and welcome, big man.
It's great. It's nice to be here not as a patient, just as hanging out and doing this little webcast. Well, it's great to be here. We got a lot to get into, especially the knee today. Obviously with RG3 and all that went down in that playoff game. When you think of knees, when you think of ACL reconstruction, when you think of replacements, Doc, could you do it in your sleep if you had to?
Probably.
How many have you done? Tons of thousands?
Probably 2,000.
2,000 of them. Wow. And how times have changed. You know, you see guys that are in their 50s and 60s. They have big, long scars up on either side of the knee. You can do it arthroscopically these days. You can do it very invasive. What a change and an evolution of how you fix the knee.
When I first started working with Jim Andrews as a resident, he was with Jack Houston back then. He was the golden boy at Jack Houston. We would do him through a big old long incision, harvest the tendon, move everything aside, we would kind of guess where we were putting it. Because we didn't really know back then, but we put it where we thought it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then lock it in with screws or whatever. Nowadays, we can work inside the knee, make little tunnels with all kind of fancy drills and reamers that come backwards on you. You actually put the reamer up like a drill bit, and then you open it up like Sputnik, and it drills back the other way.
Right.
It's a perfect hole every time.
It's like a science project, Doc.
Well, the whole thing is getting it the way it is. Now some guys are talking about doing dual bundles, trying to reproduce the bundles of the ACL.
Wow.
And I'm not so sure that's worth the effort.
All right, before we get to RG3 and how that went down and the injury and how we're going to fix it, what does Adrian Peterson's success in 2012 show us as far as having ACL reconstruction?
It shows you if you put the graft in the right place and you rehab the patient aggressively, they can come back. Now remember, that's professional level athlete with a trainer working with him every day, probably working out 3 to 4 hours
Multiple.
a day. And that's a whole big difference from what happens in the Joe Q public, who can't afford to pay a trainer 3 or 4 hours a day, and he'll come back a little bit slower than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I did bring a soccer player back in 5 months.
Did you really?
With his own tendon.
Wow.
Like he came back 5 months, but that boy worked hard.
Yeah,
so it does happen.
As a guy who had the ACL reconstruction, I mean, it's all rehab. You got to bust your butt. You got to work harder probably than you've ever worked before to get back.
But quite frankly, if the ligament isn't placed right, you never kind of really get up to full speed.
Okay.
That's a real problem. Or if in the process of you working on the ligament, you pull it out of the tunnel a little bit. When we put those things in, we put a bone plug up in the tunnel, and then we jam a screw up next to it to hold it. Well, if it frets a little bit, it pulls out of that tunnel. Then the ligament's not as strong, and you can't develop it.
Then it's not going to matter how much you rehab.
Well, you'll always be a little bit under what you were before.
All right, we're here with Dr. Stan Longenecker, JOI, Jacksonville's Orthopedic Institute, the leaders in orthopedics. Before we get into the actual injury itself and the knee, a lot of people out there, a lot of pundits, not myself because I've been there, but they're putting a lot of the blame on Coach Mike Shanahan, the head coach of the Redskins. Why did you let him continue to play? Why did you let him play at all? When he got hurt that first time, why did you let him go back in? Please just reiterate for the audience out there that at the end of the day, the doctors have to clear him. And let's make one thing for certain, the ACL didn't happen until that final play where then he couldn't go any longer. But walk the people through of what goes down when a guy gets hurt like that in a game.
Okay, first off, what happened the week before? He got hurt.
Yeah.
So he goes and sees Jim Andrews. Jim Andrews looks at the knee and says, yeah, this knee's pretty stable. You can play.
Okay.
So he gets cleared to play. That's what Jim Andrews sent to Shanahan.
Correct.
This man is cleared to play. Now, he gets in the game. He gets dinged a little bit. Doc looks at him on the sidelines. He seems okay. This is a competitor.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's a leader of his team. He is going to go back out there until he can't go.
Right.
And that's exactly what he did. Yeah. He was nicked a bit.
Right.
And I don't know a football player that's ever been in the game didn't get nicked a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And what happens? You dig down deep and you drive through it.
Yeah. You know what's funny too is a year ago we gave Jay Cutler a bunch of grief for not going back in.
Exactly.
And now we're giving RG3 grief for going back in. I mean, it's a playoff stock. Hey, Jack Youngblood back in the day played with the fracture in his leg.
And the media was all over Cutler for that.
Yeah, they were.
Now, why have they reversed themselves?
Yeah, because
how stupid it is. Well, let's just say it's flamboyant.
Yeah, and
right. It sells papers. It gets people out there. It creates controversy. Isn't that what the media likes to do?
Yeah, exactly. And so people know, the team doctors, they have final say on players' health. It's not the coach. If James Andrews went to Mike Shanahan and said, Coach, he can't go. It's done. There is no question. He goes, okay, he can't go. Let's go, Kirk Cousins, you're up. So that's how it went down. I want everyone to know from your perspective, because you've been there and done that.
Oh, I can tell you, I've had coaches perturbed with me that I wouldn't let a player play. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Safety first.
If I'm on the field, I make the decision whether that player goes back in or not.
Okay.
If the coach wants to argue with me, he is never going to see me again.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not his job. His job is to play that player to the best of the player's ability when he gets him, but not to tell me whether he can play or the player whether he can play.
Right.
There's none of this, oh, you suck it up over there.
Yeah, right.
That stuff's gone.
Yeah. No, unless the player can handle it, right?
Well, the player.
And he's not going to get hurt.
Look, we're talking about a guy making millions of dollars because he showed up to play that day. He wants to play financially. He is a leader. He wants to play spiritually.
Yeah.
I mean,
hey, I know as a former player, you'd have to carry me off, especially in a playoff.
I never played at your level, but I understand what you're saying.
Absolutely, and that's what RG3 did, and I commend him for it. And you know what? I think in today's day and age, he'll be back. He'll be back. You know, if the graft is done right, which it should, and he rehabs, which he will, he should be back in 2013.
He'll never be the same knee.
Yeah.
But, somebody was making the point yesterday. Maybe he goes to 4.4 speed.
Yeah, exactly. 4.2 to 4.4. Jeez, I feel sorry for him. Bummer. All right, before we get into the actual injury, we've got a couple gadgets here that we're going to show the people how the knee is built, where the LCL is, the ACL, and the MCL, and we'll throw in the PCL as well. How about that?
Okay.
Can we do that?
That's easy.
Yeah. Well,
that's easy.
Of course it is.
Let's take this model first because it shows bigger what's happening. This model is actually showing the kneecap here, the tibia or shin bone here, the thigh bone on top. If we turn it sideways, now we can see the MCL, medial collateral, medial on the inside of the knee. LCL, lateral collateral on the outside. Now really this lateral collateral depiction here is a little bit big, but that's okay. It runs from the little bone on the side called the fibula, and it runs up to what we call the epicondyle here. And there's actually another part of that complex it's not worth worrying about. But this is what tore, and this is what repaired. Now let's just expand on how that could happen. If he got hit in such a way that I'm not showing this right. Let me have the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's take this model for a minute because this model has straps on the side. We'll call this the lateral collateral ligament. We'll call that in the middle the ACL. And what I'm going to do is take this and stretch this way, like that, and let it fall open. And you can see that after the lateral collateral ligament goes, the next thing in line is both the PCL, which I would be worried about with a lateral collateral injury, and the ACL. And in fact, he may have had both the PCL, ACL injury, and Andrews repaired the ACL, realizing the PCL would probably do okay without it. There were, at one point, I remember Bergman, who was Cincinnati, I think, no, Cleveland. Bergman looked up 25 professional players that were playing with no PCL. Wow. Yeah. At a high level. So Andrews would know that study and might not mess with a PCL. But when you see a lateral collateral ligament go with an ACL, PCL may very well be hurt. That's something we'll find out in the time.
So now the LCL, the MCL, that doesn't always require surgery, unless what?
Well, the MCLs usually will heal themselves as long as we don't distract them in the healing process. They'll heal pretty well. I had bilateral MCL injuries and a skiing injury, and I never had them operated on. And the only thing they do is bother me if I push my big toe. I can do everything else I want to do with it without having problems. So I'm glad I never fixed them.
You don't have to push off your toes when you make a decision?
push to the inside.
To the inside.
Now, if you take and push something like you're pushing a chair with your big toe, it'll remind you that you tore it. You do that, but when you're running, you're cutting, you're doing all that stuff, it doesn't bother you.
Okay.
So it's very unusual for that to require surgery these days.
And the ACL, which I know, look, if you partially tear it and you're not a professional athlete, you might be a weekend warrior, you may or may not get it fixed, right, depending on how bad the tear is.
Well, when I blew mine, I was 58 years old, and somebody helped me along the way with a shotgun pellet, but that's all right. The long and the short of it is at 58, I chose not to have it repaired. Us older folks don't do so well with the amount of rehab it takes. So I chose not to fix it. I still ski, I still hunt, and do what I want to do with it. I just wear a brace when I need it. Now, at the higher level, I would say above recreational athlete to the high school, college, and professional athlete, you're going to hear me recommend repair it because the demands on the knee are much greater than I place on it. Sure. So there you go. We're going to fix those people.
So if you're a high athlete at those high school, college, pro, what have you, if you have a partial tear, will it keep tearing if you don't fix it, potentially?
My attitude towards a tear in the ACL has always been the same. If it's a partial tear, it really tore all the way. Okay. So from my standpoint, I will demonstrate it clinically by moving what's called a Lockman test. And if that thing moves too far forward, I'll demonstrate that by letting loose the ACL here. All of a sudden it goes like that. Right. I know that that's an unstable knee, and I'll fix it. And that's the test. People see it out there all the time. The doc sits on the foot and pulls on the back part of the shin. Yeah, you can do it either bent like this, or you could do it straight. I do it almost straight like that. That's called a Lockman test. And if do you know right away? I know it immediately. Do you? Oh, yeah. Don't test my knees, Doc. No, I won't do that to you. I'm not ready. You don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'd rather not know. But the ACL, with the lack of blood supply, because it really is in the middle of the knee, that's why it does not heal on its own. Is that correct? Oh, gosh. There are a whole bunch of different reasons, but there's a covering on it in most of them, and you tear that covering, and now it's exposed to joint fluid, which has enzymes that digest it away. Okay. All right. Dr. Stan here with us on the Tom McManus Webcast, SuckItUpUSA.com. How do we repair an ACL? Can we walk through that? Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's go back to that first model we looked at. I love these things. These things are awesome. Now, what we had here was a model depicting what I call the extensor mechanism, but what it's really showing is the patellar tendon on the front side of the knee. Here's your tibia. Here's your femur. Right. And now let's turn this over for a minute, because on the back of that's your kneecap. And that's important to understand, because what we're going to do is take a strip of bone out of the kneecap with the central third of the ligament, and also a strip of bone out of the tibia here. So that whole thing is then going to be peeled out of there, and you say, well, what's going to happen to this ligament here if you take that away? Well, it's going to be weaker, and it's going to take it about 6 to 8 months to hypertrophy or get stronger to where it will hold up to the stress of playing in sports again. Once we do that, then we go to this other model for a minute, and we're going to take that strip of bone and tendon, and we're going to drill a hole up through the bone here on the shin bone, ending up in the middle of the tibia here, and we'll drill a second hole up inside the femur, and that hole is going to allow me to pass that graft up through the middle. We actually use a wire that goes up through everything, and the wire has carry sutures that pull the graft up into position. Once that graft's in the middle of the tunnel here, that piece of bone is up against bone, we take a screw and we run it up adjacent to it so that it jams it out against the edge. Okay, so it would be like if you had a hole, you stuck a rope in the hole, and then you stuck a dowel down in along the edge of that, and it holds that rope from moving. It's important for people to realize that that's exactly what's happening. You are holding it with just a screw jammed in there. Now, what can happen is the patient gets real busy and does a bunch of exercises at gym and work on this thing. They can actually pull that part way out of the bone, and then the ligament just doesn't work right. So that's a failed ACL. And the long and the short of it is, with good rehab techniques, about 90% of these make it. Now, you can also do it with what's called an allograft. You can go to the bone bank, and you can get a piece of tissue from somebody else's body, put that in there. The only problem with those is only about 60% of those survive. We don't know why. We don't know why. But they don't survive as well. But the rehab is twice as fast. I've actually had a soccer player back in 3 months for that. Most guys are going to go for the 90% success rate rather than the 60%.
Yeah. You're right. And actually, I went the cadaver ligament myself.
Well,
just
there.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah. No, it worked. It worked for me. But you're right. And it's really, I guess the graft to take. It's really that the bones take the bone graft, right? I think people think you just throw a ligament in there, but it's bone, ligament, bone. You filter it through like you were saying. You anchor it down with this. Man, I tell you what. Can I go in on the next one? I'll be right there.
Come on in there, brother.
I'll be screwing it in there with you. But that's really what you need to take. That bone will heal within.
That's what stabilizes.
Okay.
The second phase was really kind of cool. The Japanese actually did a study where they looked at that graft every month in a group of volunteers, and they would go in, and at 18 months, the blood supply crept down across and created a membrane all the way through the ligament and given it a new blood supply.
Wow.
18 months it took.
Wow.
Which is why guys like me are protective of that graft for up to 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, couple quick questions as we wrap up the ACL. Why, I get asked this all the time, when guys hurt their knee and it's an ACL, how can they walk off the field? How do they get off?
The knee has not swelled up yet. It'll swell within an hour most of the time. It'll blow up and get real tight within an hour because there's an artery inside the ACL that tears. Then when they first get up, their knee will feel gimpy. But as soon as they get weight on it, they start to trust it a little bit. They can walk off the field, but if they twist the slides a little bit, it'll go out from underneath them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, the knee, when it's warmed up, I don't know if you ever examined a knee that's warm, that's been on the field.
Right.
It's much looser.
Okay.
It's really sloppy because it loosens up to allow you to play. Of course, as you get through the cool down period, everything tightens back up again. Thus, when you get up and you start to go, for instance, running, you start to run, you feel tight, right? And then after you've been running 10 or 15 minutes, everything seems to loosen up and go. Same thing happens on sport. Any sport you play, it takes a while to warm up and get everything moving right. If you go out cold, things get torn.
Yeah, they do, no doubt about that. And finally, Doc, I know from rehab, the first thing they do is get the flexion back, right, and the extension. You got to break through, what is it, scar tissue that we're talking about?
To form scar tissue.
Okay.
If you let blood sit in the knee for a week or two, it'll start forming these little spider webs all through the knee.
Okay.
Those are uncomfortable to try and get moving.
Sure.
So that's the reason there's so much pressure to get it moving.
Okay. Fantastic stuff. Thanks for taking us inside the ACL and the knee, whether it's shoulder, elbow, knee, you name it. Dr. Stan Longenecker here at JOI, Jacksonville's Orthopedic Institute, has seen it. You can go right to their website at joionline.net or go to suckitupusa.com and click right on their logo. Take you right in. Check out Dr. Stan Longenecker's profile. You can even set an appointment. The official sports medicine partners of the Jacksonville Jaguars, JOI, the leaders in orthopedics. Great to be in your office.
Not the ones that are saying they're taking care of the Jags on TV shows.
Yeah, no, exactly.
They try to make it look like they're the real boys.
No, I know. Well, we know who the real guys are. It's you guys right here, man. You're the man. You're the man, Dr. Stan. 904-388-1400, or just go to the website and set an appointment with Dr. Stan Longenecker from JOI, Jacksonville's Orthopedic Institute. We'll see you next time right here. Hug the ones you love. Tell them you love them, because you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And we'll see you next time right here on the McManus Webcast at suckitupusa.com. Thanks, Doc.
Love you, man.
You're the man, man. Love you too, buddy.